And so one side has been making progress. The other side has been making propaganda videos to show running a propaganda war. At some point, the propaganda gives way to reality as they are encircling large numbers of Ukrainian forces. And I said that weeks ago. And yeah, at some point, propaganda has to give way to reality, right? Look at this. Ukraine is in worse shape than you think. What, that one is Time? Washington Post. Ukraine suffers on a battlefield while pleading for U.S. arms. Here's another one. Russia wins in eastern Ukraine sparks debate over course of the war. Sparks the debate. What are we going to do? Russians' Cauldron tactic may be tipping Donbass battle in its favor. I love it. God, man, I think people are idiots. Cauldrons, this is World War II stuff, right? They're acting as if it's a cauldron tactic. It's something exotic. It's the way wars were fought going back to World War II. Whatever. Okay, fair enough. Your people are idiots, right? Shrapnel in the forest. Guys, I've never seen such hell. And look, I mean, right here. Artillery. Look at that.
Суки, блядь. Ебать.
It's like it's raining fire. Imagine being on the end of that. And you're eating a potato a day or something like that. And you're sitting there with a gun with not enough bullets. And you're supposed to be there and fight it with your courage. That's what you're supposed to do. Look, I'm showing you this in order to point out I was right. I was right. That was weeks ago. I probably can find other parts of it even further back than that. I was right. And if anybody that has watched this channel for a while, I think, I have somewhat of fanaticism about being right. Am I right all the time? Of course not. I'm a person. Am I right most of the time? Oh my God, yes. Now, when I do a show, I give you the line of logic that I'm going with for the very specific point of you can see where this is going. Meaning, separate and distinct from where I work, from what I'm doing. I'm giving you an argument. I'm giving you the line of logic. Then I'm getting to the point of that argument. And you can evaluate the various points along the way in order to back up the thing that I'm giving you. It's not like mainstream media where they just say something and another person just kind of runs with it. I try to make the point clear. And so, yes, my reporting on this for the last several months have been right. And by the way, that's not a chest thumping about the war. In fact, the war has nothing to do with that. This is purely self-affirming thing. I mean, I told you I have a schoolboy philosophy in regards to mainstream or media. Sitting on the moon, looking at events, what is the world? And explaining to people in a contextual, honest, contextual way. Where you get to say, look, this is what is going on. And this is what I think about what's going on. Again, with the line of logic from the particular argument to be made. That's the way I see it. I'm sitting on the moon because I don't want to be adversely affected by the stuff that these guys are putting out, because oftentimes what they're putting out has a very specific objective. Meaning, I'm giving you information from the standpoint of media, mainstream media. I'm giving you information in order to give you a point of view. And the information itself is curbed in a way in order to incentivize a certain point of view that I want you to get. And then when all of these guys basically get on the same page, and all of these guys have a point of view that is adversarial to my own, meaning I am saying something that they fundamentally disagree with, or at the very least, they're printing stuff that is direct contradiction to what I'm saying. And then they take the extra step of, oh, this is just propaganda, you're just lying about it. So yeah, it is very self-affirming to be in a position of saying, this is what I was reporting for the last several months. They said I was wrong on that. I was right. And now all of these guys, again, one after the other, are now reporting, okay, this is utterly horrendous. This is not a good situation. Russia is accomplishing its objectives. It seems like they're going to take Donbass. The Ukrainian military is falling apart. This is stuff that anybody who's been looking at the situation honestly could have told you weeks ago. They're now coming to Jesus. Okay, welcome to reality. I'm just making the point that if I'm right, and they were saying that I was basically out of my mind, then what the hell have they been doing for the last several months? What have they been doing? How's this not radically discrediting from the standpoint of mainstream media? But whatever. Has nothing to do with the chest thump. I've made my position about the war clearly every time I basically start the video. I think it's utterly atrocious and senseless. It is a pointless endeavor that didn't need to exist by any stretch of the imagination. And yet, here we are. People losing their lives for something that is utterly and entirely pointless. If I'm being bluntly honest, the Western governments decided to target Russia. I have no idea how anybody can come to an assessment that is not that. I mean, either from the standpoint of NATO, from the standpoint of knocking over Ukraine, having those guys in there where you're basically integrating these guys into NATO in some sense. You basically have the Western governments acting in a way as if the objective is to somehow overthrow the government of Russia. It is a threatening action that is basically taking place. And so at the point where the Ukrainian troops are basically threatening to overrun the ethnic Russian-Ukrainian region, and again, they step up attacks on this. You already have a tense situation, they step up attacks. And it's almost like the stepping up of attacks was intentionally done in order to create a response from a standpoint of Russia. Okay, it's fair enough. All of the governments have decided that we're going to align ourselves against Russia in this particular way. At the point where Russia responds, because look, any government, America included, given the same situation, would have responded in the exact same way. And I strongly suspect America would have been far more aggressive in the way that they did it, as opposed to the way Russia did it. I'm just making the point of saying this is not something that's specific and distinct to Russia. It is just not. Look at the way your government behaves and ask yourself, if the government is in that position, what would the government do? The government would respond because the government is never going to allow itself to be encircled in that way. Period. Cuban Missile Crisis. Perfect example. Mexico gets knocked over. Will the U.S. tolerate Russia putting weapons in Mexico to target the U.S.? Of course not. Well, you got to be honest about that, right? And I guess that's my point. My job is just what is true and to be able to say it. These countries decide to target another country. At the point where the country responds, these countries decide to have an economic war with the stated objectives of destroying the country that it was already targeting. That is just true. Now, the problem here for me is multiple points. A, you shouldn't be doing that. Those are sovereign states. You shouldn't be doing that. B, why are your idiots in Europe joining in to do that? Meaning, is that really what people put you in office to do? To basically target other nations for some level of overthrowing the government or even screwing with other nations in that particular way. Why are you doing that? So, to me, it's you need to lose. You need to lose. And you need to lose for several reasons. But two main ones, A, you shouldn't be doing it. And B, they're affairs of your states itself that you need to be paying attention to that you're just not. Meaning, in this very specific case, you are worsening the economic situation of the various people in your country, people that vote for you. I mean, look at what's going on from the price of food. The UK has been putting articles out bitching about the price of food. And it's like, gotta pay for your values. Gotta pay for your values. That's what Jen Psaki told me. Gotta pay for my values. So, yeah, you shouldn't be targeting another country. And on top of that, you need to be attending to the affairs of your own country, period. And if you win with this is a model going forward. I don't want that. I don't like this geopolitics stuff on this kind of the world's chessboard stuff where you're basically undermining other countries and putting those countries under threat. Yes, you should lose. I want this war to be over with. I want this war to be over with as soon as possible. And since Zelensky and his men are talking about 3 months, I want this war to be over with. If that means Moscow takes Ukraine, then Moscow takes Ukraine. That's my position on it. This shouldn't be happening in the first place. Our governments shouldn't be responding and acting in these kind of uncouth, belligerent ways. And in this situation, do I want this to be a model going forward in the way that these countries think that they can basically act? Target a nation, provoke a war, start economic sanctions and attacks on them? No, I don't want that. I don't want that. In the situation that we have over the weekend, it seems that things have accelerated So this is the map of where things basically stand. Up here, Severodonetsk, Lizzie Chance. Severodonetsk is being attacked. The Russian forces are basically storming Severodonetsk. Now, this is backed up in Western media also, right here. In the East, Washington Post. In the easternmost province of Luhansk, Russia controls more than 95% of the territory, according to the Institute Study of War, a Washington-based think tank. Severodonetsk, one of the last big cities under Ukrainian control in eastern Luhansk, is under major assault with forces encircling the city. Russian troops are steadily approaching from the northeast. They already control several areas. Go to New York Times. The battered city of Severodonetsk has been in Russian crosshairs for weeks, pounded full might of Russia's or Moscow's artillery. Russian forces are now advancing from two sides on the outskirts of the city as President Vladimir Putin, stung by repeated setbacks in the first month. You got to put that in, right? Meaning you can't just play it as Putin is accomplishing the objectives. He's about to take another city, but he failed in the beginning. Okay, great. New York Times, you got that in. Let's keep going. Here's another one. Its capture would open way for Russian forces to set sights on the westward to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, the last major Ukrainian hill cities, and Donbass, which includes Luhansk as its neighbor, Donetsk. Taking them would all but fulfill a goal set by Vladimir Putin of Russia on the eve of his invasion in Ukraine in February. Russian-backed separatists seized control in 2014 of Luhansk and Donetsk. The way they talk about this is astonishing. You guys threw over a government. What the hell is wrong with you? You threw over a government and put a Russophobic government in place. That is just true. That's just true. If you are ethnic Russian or Russian speaking, you don't want Ukraine to be in NATO. The legitimate government has just collapsed. How are you wrong for declaring yourself independent when there is no longer a legitimate government of Ukraine and the government that has basically assumed control is hostile to your very existence? How do you do that? How do you do that? And how are you as a newspaper in Western media, as you report that, Russian-backed separatists seized control? They live there. That were their homes. What are you talking about seize control? These people voted to be independent. I'm sorry. It's just aggravating. It's just aggravating. It's just aggravating. That's all. That's all. It's just the way they write this stuff. Like, it leaves all understanding of what's happening. Meaning it's not gray anymore. It's just black, white. This is how I need you to understand this issue. This is the American perspective on this issue. It's just aggravating after a while. You like hit your head on it, going through the stuff that they write. Whatever. Now, Chechens Head, Cauldron, so Russia takes control of Severodonetsk. Now, the New York Times has been reporting basically street fighting, and it seems that there's a conflict going on. I strongly suspect that this gentleman is jumping the gun. But just because he's jumping the gun doesn't necessarily mean he's entirely wrong in context. Meaning, it seems that Severodonetsk is falling. I would be shocked if we're talking about a week. This sounds like a few days. His assessment on this is interesting, though. He basically says, quote, Severodonetsk is under complete control. The city has been liberated. The residents can rest easy. They're no longer in jeopardy from now on, Cauldron wrote in his Telegram channel. According to Cauldron, it was expected to take control of the town in a week's time, but the goal was achieved more quickly. The initial plan was to liberate Severodonetsk in a week, but today I made corrections and set the task of taking control of the town in 3 days. As a result, our soldiers done it more quickly. 3 hours. 3 hours. I appreciate his confidence. I appreciate his confidence. And I appreciate this notion that my troops are Superman. They're Supermen. We took it in days. We took it in hours. We just did it in hours. Okay. If you did that in hours, why are the reports of street fighting in Severodonetsk? Now, they do say in the New York Times that Russia has taken, let's see, is it this one? I think it's, where is it? I've been reading so many of these, I forget which one it is. Maybe it's this one. Right here. The latest indicator of the dividend came on Saturday when two senior Ukrainian officials said Ukrainian and Russian forces were locked in heavy street fighting inside the eastern city of Severodonetsk, where Russian soldiers had advanced to within a few blocks of the administrative headquarters. By Saturday morning, Russians had captured a bus station and a hotel in the city's northeast and damaged 14 high-rise buildings during the last 3 rounds of shelling overnight, the head of Luhansk province, military administration, Serhiy Haidari, I guess, said. Western outlets, come to Jesus. Western outlets, come to Jesus. God, man, this is so aggravating. It's such a senseless war. Now, that's the reality of it, meaning that's what's occurring now. Severodonetsk is falling. All right. Biden, I asked the question in the other video, what is Biden going to do? What is Biden going to do? You decide to target a country. You decide to provoke a war, literal war, using a patsy nation to do it. Then you decide to get all your gang of idiots in Europe to have an economic war on top of that. Fair enough. You decided to do that. That's what you're doing. Neither goes well. Neither goes well. The economic war has backfired immensely. And by the way, so much so, the polling in the U.S. on that with people talking about the war, they think Biden's policy against Russia is wrong. Not just that. They may say Putin shouldn't have invaded. But here's the thing. At the point where there are economic consequences that are basically hitting the people at home, they're going to care about the economic consequences more. Flat fact, anytime. We care about the stuff that happens here more. And so people give him a negative rating on a thing associated with him in Russia because they know that what he's doing is having negative consequences here. It's not just here, also in Europe. So those two things aren't going well. You are giving $40 billion. You signed a Lend-Lease bill. Most of that $40 billion is basically coming back to us, but whatever. You signed a Lend-Lease bill, and you've been sending weapons hand over fist. Europe has been given $15 billion in order to keep Ukrainian state functional in and of itself. The economy of the country is basically falling apart. Russia it looks as if, even by their own accounts, are going to take the entire Donbass region and accomplish those particular objectives. This is not something that is going well. So the question becomes, what is Biden going to do? Is Biden going to escalate by sending long-range weapons, something that he knows that if those things are hitting into Russia proper, this notion that Russia keeping the chains on will be off the table? He quibbled over it. The answer is Biden escalates. Biden is preparing to send long-range rocket systems to Ukraine. Keep in mind, they were quibbling about this. Biden didn't want to do this because he didn't want to take the chance of escalating the war. Now, again, I point out how sick that is. You have a country that is it is a real war in Europe. And you don't believe that you can win it, but you're sending weapons just enough to keep it going. Think of how sick that is. And so that's kind of this kind of cynical approach that we took in this country. We wanted to degrade and to bleed the Russian military. So we wanted to keep them in a bubbling war, per se. If we can get Russia into somewhat of a morass, China is that much more vulnerably independent. Meaning if Russia is exhausted, then its natural ally in this situation is isolated. Well, that's not going that way. It's not going that way at all. These guys are running out of weapons. The military, from the standpoint of Ukraine, is undertrained. They're sending in old men, children in some cases. I mean, at this point, these people are being used as cannon fodder for the long-term plans of Zelensky in order to create some kind of strong point in the West. At this point, it is unclear whether Ukraine can ever keep going, but whatever. Biden has decided, I am going to send more advanced weapon systems. Ukraine, I've pointed out before in my analysis, it seems that Zelensky's plan is basically, we can keep fighting. We're going to get these weapons. We're going to get our people trained. That's those weapons and stuff are going to be in the West in some particular way. And we have plans on taking back the territory that we lost in a turning point in several months. This is the way they are basically thinking. This is insane, which means that the plan is basically the longer it takes to take the Donbass region, the more time we have at our disposal in order to create something in the West to make potential plans later on with more advanced weapon systems from Western nations to reattack and take back territory. That means they're willing to sacrifice the 10, 15,000 troops that are in Ukraine, and in the Donbass, what the Kramatorsk, I believe those troops are, in order to do something later on in the West. It's almost like we need you guys to stand there and hold while we build the stuff here, which by definition means we're willing to lose you. I mean, this is sick. The only reason this war is continuing on is because these Western nations are just dumping weapons and money into Ukraine in order to keep it going. That thing will stop overnight if they push them to end it, and yet it doesn't happen. It continues and it keeps going. Their stated objective is to A, destroy the Russian economy. That did not happen. And then it was to destroy and degrade the Russian military. Again, that also did not happen. They don't want to admit that they've lost. And as long as they can keep going and say that this is still going on, they don't have to admit that this has failed monstrously. And we are going into a recession for something that they basically failed and that never had to take place in the first place. And to make my point about Zelensky, I know this sounds harsh, but don't take my word for it. This is what they're saying in their own papers. Quote, the situation in Donbass is extremely bad. Some villages no longer physically exist because they're in ruins. It's Kobela. The governor of Luhansk says Sergei Gaidai also called the situation close to critical. He acknowledged territorial losses. If in mid-May he said Ukraine controls 10% of the region's territory, then by May 25th he said we're already only 5%. The situation is very bad. Volodymyr Zelensky, now the situation in Donbass is very complicated. In fact, all the might of the Russian army, which it still now has been thrown into the offensive. Liman, Popasnaya, Severodonetsk, Slaviansk. The invaders want to destroy everything there, the president said on May 24th. Last night, Ereshevich said the enemy had, quote, learned how to fight and its tactical success can develop an operational one, unquote. They're admitting to it. This is bad. This is critical. This is horrendous. And they're admitting that stuff in media now. Here's the other part. And yet, they're also saying stuff like this. Let's put it this way. By August, the amount of weapons supplied by Ukraine will have reached, so to speak, significant quantities. You have to understand that from that time of the announcement of the supply of weapons, there are the following stages. The first is the entry of the weapons into the country. The second is the acquisition of these weapons. And only in the third stage is the beginning of its use. It all takes time. Therefore, unfortunately, by August, the amount of weapons needed by the troops will not be in significant quantities. From August, all of this will be in military units and will be actively used in hostilities. That is why the turning point will begin, because we are now catastrophically short of weapons. Who is this? What is this gentleman's name? This is Budanov, head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. He's talking about August. Here's another statement. This is Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov declared on Saturday that Kiev will still win this conflict. Quote, I would like to inform the coastal strength of our country will not only be strengthened by the Harpoon missiles, they will be used by trained Ukrainian teams, he added. On Monday, following a virtual meeting with American allies, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced that Denmark will send an unspecified number of these missiles to Ukraine. Quote, I am confident that the military brotherhood of Harpoons and our Neptunes will help us liberate and make our Black Sea safe again, as well as reliably protect Odessa. Reznikov declared Neptunes refer to Ukrainian manufacturing cruise missile. Kiev claims it used to strike the Russian warship in April. There was another one of these. All right, I can't find it. But yeah, I think someone was even like, we're going to take back Crimea. They're talking about this stuff, though, projected outward. And they're talking about it in the context of, we're going to get these weapons. We're going to train on these weapons, and et cetera. Well, how long is it going to take you to train on the weapons? How long is it going to take you to get the weapons? Where are those weapons going to be positioned and located? And if indeed those are not going to be able to get to the zone of offense, meaning the main line or the main theater in the east, then those weapons are going to be in the west. At least this is the way I frame it. I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, say so. Those weapons in the west allow a certain power center to be created in the west with conscripts and everything else being trained in order to use those weapons, and those weapons are going to be more sophisticated than the weapons that are basically being destroyed in the east. But that, by definition, doesn't that mean that they're willing to let the east fall? and that they can't let the troops retreat, because if the troops retreat, it cuts down the amount of time that they can build up whatever they're building up in the West. It's almost like a standing maneuver. And so it's like, I need you guys to stay there. And yes, get annihilated. But your annihilation is going to help us get strong again and take back the territory. And so when the people are talking about they feel like they're being betrayed or they feel like they're being used as cannon fodder, the low morale, that's where that is coming from. They're not insane. They can see exactly what is taking place. Again, this is, when I talk about this war as being senseless, it is hard to get across what I mean or how senseless it is. This did not need to take place. You have all of these people dying for no reason. Ukraine is being carved up and will leave this an exhausted nation. However that looks, it may not leave it at all intact, depending upon what the leaders of that place at all. They took a maximalist position on each and everything that came up. Almost this kind of weird cultural chauvinism, despite the fact that stuff is self-delusional. It is no basis in reality in the way that they basically see themselves and the way that they engage other states, especially in this sense, Russia. Rational actors, as opposed to whoever these morons are, could have avoided this conflict. These people are dying for no good reason. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, and I'm going to say subscribe. Thanks all.